Hello, and welcome to my first episode of podcasting for Thomas Martellone Genealogy Research. My name's Thomas Martellone. I'll probably refer to myself as Tom for the rest of my episodes. I am the owner of Thomas Martellone Genealogy Research, and I am using this first podcasting episode to introduce myself. I've been researching for myself and others for over 35 years, and over the past few years have begun a genealogy business where I do research for other people. I primarily focus on Italian genealogy research. However, I am able to do other records research, and I enjoy doing that. So that will be probably a topic for future podcasts. This particular podcast is just a little background about me, and that way anybody listening to my podcast kind of gets a sense of who I am and the work that I've done or my experiences that I've had, which I think not only help engage a listener for a podcast, but also makes you wonder or think about if the person's actually a plausible person to listen to. So you wouldn't listen to a person who did automotive work talk about heart surgery. So I would hope that you would want to listen to somebody who knows about genealogy research if you're listening to this blog. So my background actually is in education. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education. I have a master's degree, and I have an education specialization in educational leadership. I've been in education now for about 30 years. I was a teacher, and then I've been a school administrator. I've been a state level manager in the education field, and most recently I've been a technology director in a school district. My path to genealogy came about accidentally. I was probably about 13 years old, and I met one of my relatives for the first time who lived out of state. My Aunt Janice, who lived in Louisiana. We met when, again, I was about 13, and she was Mormon. I'm Catholic, and we met shortly after my grandparents passed, and I would spend time during the summer with my father, and ended up getting very close to my aunt, who was a sister. My aunt was really invested in genealogy research as part of her religious beliefs. When I first met her, I was not really as interested as I would later become, but I did, I did listen to what she shared with me, and I watched and looked at some of the work that she did. That was, again, I was about 13. So 13 years old, 14 years old, you're probably not super interested in genealogy research and thinking about your family history. It was probably a little bit later on, when I was about 16 or 17, that I became more interested and started asking some questions, and I would look at some of the work that my aunt did with her genealogy research, and then I kind of later began taking some of the information she had shared and then working on my own. Again, we shared information back and forth. There was always a telephone call with some type of a find or a question, or I would be working on something. I'd call her and say, hey, what do you think about this? And we would kind of hash it out. And sometimes I'd be researching while I was talking to her on the phone. So by the time I was about probably 18 or 19, I had been doing more research. I remember sitting with my mom's mother, who was the grandparent I was closest to, and I remember asking her questions about, what was it like when you came to this country, and what do you remember, and tell me about your parents, and all of those kinds of questions that, when you first begin and you have family members available to you, you want to know and get some of that information. Looking back now, I really wished that when my aunt first introduced me to genealogy research, I had asked more questions, because I think I probably would have had more information or would have prompted some other questions. But obviously, you can't turn back the hands of time, and I am thankful for the questions I asked and the information I got, and I keep kind of moving forward. So I really started doing more work on this in my later teens. Just to give you an idea, I turned 57 last year, so I've really been working on my family history and genealogical research now for about 40 years. And after a period of time, I really kind of caught what might be called the genealogy bug. I was traveling to Mormon stake centers where microfilm was housed and other records could be accessed. And then I was also making my way to vital statistics offices trying to get records that were close and local to me. So I remember at some point there were microfilms being made available because the Mormon Church had gone to other countries and done microfilming of birth, death, and marriage records. And that was of a great and particular interest to me. I've been interested in all branches of my family. My mother's parents were both immigrants from southern Italy. They were from Puglia. And my father's father was conceived in northern Italy in the Piedmont region, and he was born in Arizona. And that's going to be a story for another podcast. And then I had one grandparent who was not Italian, and her family were farmers and migrant workers, and they made their way from the mid-Atlantic states and the start of the southern states all the way across the south and the west to California. So I've had the good fortune of researching records in the United States across many states, so all kinds of vital records and court documents, and researching graveyard records and other associated documents. And then I've spent a lot of time researching Italian records based on the fact that I had 3 out of 4 grandparents who were Italian. So I started researching back in a time where again, you needed to go to courthouses and you needed to look at books and documents that were not necessarily online. I then kind of migrated to Italian records that were online. Well, I'll just say they started off on microfilm, and I would drive to a stake center. I would lease microfilm from the Mormon Church I was housed there, and I would then use that microfilm and move it from one machine to another to make copies. And then eventually the Mormon Church began migrating all of the microfilmed records to their online platform through Family Search. And over the years, I also found other websites and resources that would allow me to research Italian records online as well. So if you were to fast forward, I'm now fortunate to be living in a time for genealogy researchers where there are lots of records that are available to people at their fingertips. So I do a lot of research for myself. I've done research for other people where I'm able to access Italian birth, death, and marriage records from churches online. And then I've also been able to research civil records that are also available online. And I'll do a podcast about the difference between the church records and the civil records later. So I spend a lot of time doing Italian genealogy research and trying to trace the different lines of my family, both in southern and northern Italy. It's been a great adventure, and at one point, my aunt passed. That was a huge loss for me because she had got me started in doing genealogy research and really inspired me. And again, as I said earlier, I would call her with research questions and problems, and we would kind of hash out either discoveries or would celebrate those all the time. Also, we would kind of talk about, oh, hey, I found this certificate, but I'm not really sure about the information on here. And so, she was a great inspiration to me. And, losing her at what I would consider a relatively young age was a challenge for me personally and genealogically, because she was kind of my lifeline and the person that I relied on to kind of, do the work with. And at one point I did inherit all of her genealogy materials. I'm sitting here at my desk now, kind of looking at stacks that I've started scanning and working to get online. And so I've worked on that over the past couple of years, a little bit at a time. In addition to that, and being inspired by my aunt, because I am an educator at heart, and as I shared, I've worked in education for about 30 years. I have also done work related to Italian genealogy research and genealogy methodology. So over the past couple of years, I've earned a certificate in basic genealogy methodology. I've also earned both a basic and intermediate certificate in Italian genealogy records research. So I feel quite comfortable looking at those records. I am not 100% fluent, but I am pretty good with my Italian. At least my relatives in Italy say so. I was inspired by the teachings that my aunt gave me in my research, and I had made a bucket list. So my bucket list included 3 things, and looking back, I think maybe it was the world's shortest bucket list, and I don't know, maybe I'll come up with some more items to add to it. One of them was to buy a Fiat. I know that sounds silly, but I did do that. And another was to get my Italian citizenship, which I've now had for probably about 12 or 13 years. And then the third item on my bucket list was to buy a property in Italy. I've had the good fortune to buy a condominium in northern Italy in the Piedmont, which is close to where my family was from. And then a couple years ago, I was also able to purchase my great-grandfather's house. And the house story and associated tales will be another podcast at another time. So it's been quite a journey personally, and I would say professionally as someone who does genealogy research for myself and for others. I feel like the field has changed with the arrival of DNA and genetic genealogy. That's been really fascinating, and that has changed the way I do some of my work. Also, as I mentioned, technology and being able to access records easily, that's also changed the work that I've done and the work that I do for other people. So a couple years ago, I started Thomas Martellone Genealogy Research, and basically my work through that business is to provide genealogical research services for people who are interested in tracing their Italian ancestry. As I mentioned, I can also do other research. I will say I particularly am fond of the Italian genealogy research because the Italians have kept great records, and one document can contain a lot of information. So that's been really a high spot for me in regards to the work, and then my own personal interests. So I have a website. It's called Thomas Martellone Genealogy Research, and I have blog pieces that I've written on there, and my hope is to use the podcast platform to talk about my research and share stories and maybe encourage other people to get into genealogy research or to think about a research problem that they've had or something they've been working on. Sometimes having somebody to talk about a research problem is a great way to help solve a mystery or to celebrate a find. So, welcome to my podcast. I hope you've stuck in with me for the 15 minutes I've been talking. And my hope would be that I'll be able to publish other podcasts and provide content that's of interest to people doing research. Again, thanks for following along, and I hope you join me for other podcasts I'll do in the future where I'll share content and anecdotes that might be either amusing, they might be enlightening, they might be shocking. You never know what you'll find with genealogy research. And I would just want to say thanks for coming along for the ride. Till next time, take care.